All right, thank you. All right, I've got plenty of slides here for the 30-minute talk. I'm going to try to stick with the slides for the most part and pop over to a quasi-live demo probably early on, but we'll stick to the slides for most of the content. So I am with IBM. I work on the AI Alliance team at IBM, which is a consortium of 200 organizations that have been working together for the last couple of years on a number of fronts. I organized a knowledge work group a little over a year ago, and this is a project that I've been speaking about to that group through the last half of last year quite a bit, and then I've been giving more talks like this in recent months. So we'll dive in. There's a QR code for you that'll take you to the GitHub repository. This is an open source project. It's released under an Apache 2 license. It's been going through a lot of changes. It is, I would consider it not quite in beta release. There's still probably a couple of, not major, but probably a couple of breaking changes coming up. But with that said, it's a lot stabler than it was a couple of months ago, and I've been using it quite a bit. So this is a general outline of the talk. And I think that at this point, I'm just going to pop over to browser and just show you what we're talking about before I get too deep into the how or the why. Let's make this concrete. So hopefully you can see this. So one way to think about this project is it's an AI native wiki. Now that's been kind of a hot topic the last couple of weeks. There was some noteworthy discussion of that. So I'm going to define what a wiki is to me, and I think to the broader community. But hopefully, this kind of format would recognize as something that looks like a wiki. So if you come in from the top page, you'll see the opportunity to search for resources, and then of course you can add them, collaborate with others on the content, edit the structure, and so forth. So I'm just going to pop in here. I just put this together before the talk. I've annotated this tiny little document with a couple of reference annotations. So we can generate a document for Neo4j. And a few seconds later, we should have there we go. All right, so we've got a new resource we've just added to the wiki. So that at a really high level is the pattern. We can search for resources, we can add them. I kind of skipped over that part. I did that before the talk. We can annotate them, and I showed a reference or a linking annotation, but there are a few other motivations for annotation. And then we can resolve that unresolved reference by, in a few ways, what you just saw was the utilizing the context, which was pretty minimal at that point. But the context of that initial hello document was used to help generate this document. Okay, so I'm going to pop back over to the deck and keep going. And the name Semiont there is just a neologism mashup of semiotics and biont. And if you want to construe the ont as implying something about ontologies, that's a welcome connotation as well. Okay, so kind of going back to the why, these were some of the big questions that I and this knowledge work group were looking to answer together as we met every couple of weeks. And then each member of that group kind of has their own project, many of which are evolving, I would say, in similar directions, but not identical. Sort of interesting to see what the different ideas that people are bringing to the table. As I was thinking a couple of months ago about the biggest questions that we're trying to answer here, it's where do the graphs that underlie a knowledge graph come from? I had done a lot of work about a year ago as a part of the Alliance on GraphRag, and hit the same stumbling block that I think a lot of folks do, which is the techniques for creating those graphs in the first place were not well understood or felt risky. So we wanted to invest some time in answering that question for ourselves. And then also think about how they relate to the user experience through the UI. That those graphs may not just be backend data structures; they may actually be intimately woven into the user interface. And then how can we get all of the graphs? No organization is going to have at hand or be able to produce all of the graphs that might be useful. So how is it can a larger community organize itself to publish those? And then another inspiration or constraint is this belief in document grounded knowledge. I had a professor years ago who used to talk about in times of great technological disruption, the anthropological universals, the things that have been around for thousands of years, are the things that are least likely to be disrupted. So I think one of those, in our case, would be documents. So I have a little picture here from a couple decades ago of the Code of Hammurabi from almost 4,000 years ago. There have been documents for longer than that, and documents are probably here to stay. And in those AI systems that are operating in environments that demand high trust and verifiability, staying close to them, either by being able to cite them with high confidence or being able to create new authoritative and meaningful documents is really important. And then the other tenet, the other conceptual tenet is that, and this is part of why I arrived at this word wiki in the first place, was making humans and AI agents architectural equals. And we'll talk more about that. But in some of my experience in building AI systems in the past, I have a career in legal tech and careers in music before that, and affiliate marketing and some other things. It always seemed like the AI was kind of often bolted on in previous generations, either that or the humans in the loop were bolted on. And so this was an opportunity to step back and say, well, what if they were, from an architectural perspective, equivalent? If they had the same API surface area with which to interact with the system. And then just a little bit, working through some concrete examples. So what do we mean by a knowledge base? It's not a database. Wiki gets at a lot of the intuition, but just to work through a couple of quick examples here, and I won't read every word here, but just walking through the schema, ingestion, and enrichment for, in this case, it's a home ownership knowledge base. I became a homeowner for the first time about 6.5 years ago, and it's quite a task to stay on top of all of the maintenance and upkeep and so forth. So, and it's also the case that I think this is a software niche that it's not likely to be filled by any kind of mature software. This to me seems like chaotic enough that it's among the class of software problems that are well solved by all of the new capabilities that the LLMs bring to the table, if we can kind of put them in the right context of a knowledge base. And then something that's a little bit more enterprisey, thinking about a legal operations team at a Fortune 500 company. What are all of the entities that they would want to track in their knowledge base? And of course, there's going to be a strong correspondence between the knowledge base and the graph. We'll talk about that throughout. So there's a set of entity types that we would want to track, a certain set of documents that you would invariably encounter in setting up a legal ops knowledge base, and then enriching or annotating those documents as they come in. So going back to that, just the basic definition of a wiki. Why do we use that word? This is as far as I can tell, this is basically more or less the canonical definition, is that it's a website that allows its users to edit its content and structure. That seemed really well suited for the kinds of document-oriented enterprise domains and other domains, personal domains, that we were looking to build systems for. So this is a little bit of a post hoc rationalization, but effectively what took place was last July, I started building a wiki, and then built in AI assistance like document generation into it, with the idea of ultimately having the AI and the humans be architectural equals. And then we factored out the event protocol. This has mostly been a solo project so far, but factored out the event protocol and then kind of clustered them based on the user intent. So of all of the dozens of kinds of messages that take place in the system, I pulled out roughly 7, or there are 7 kind of knowledge workflow related activities or intents that I've identified, and I'll talk about those in a moment. And then, of course, we wanted this to be model independent, cloud platform independent, open source, and something that could be installed quickly and easily. Okay, so speaking of that, here again is the QR code for the Git repository. I'll just pause there for a second if anybody wants to grab that, or you can go to the AI-Alliance/Semiont. And now this is fairly new. I'm showing here an Apple container invocation. The same should work for Docker or Podman. But if you just want to run that image, the system was factored into a distinct browser front end and then a back end. So, and as you can see in the upper right screenshot, there are links that find knowledge bases and create a new one. There are links to the instructions to do those things, to either find a knowledge base. There's only a couple there right now. That list is going to be growing soon. Or the second link, create a new one, is the link to, and I'll show that in a moment. That's the link to do a Git clone of a template knowledge base repository. So once you get this browser up and running, you'll just hit localhost port 3000. And then you saw the panel that was open was asking for credentials to connect. In order to set up the knowledge base that would have those credentials and be the basis for the knowledge base, the recommendation is to clone this template. There are a couple of configurations that come with that template. One is Anthropic based, and the other one is Ollama with Gemma models. So then those will both show up if you do that list configs. So what's in that Git repository, that template? So this is not the main Semiont repository, but the knowledge base itself. So I've kind of marked up the directory structure on the right here. So at the bottom, your content. This is not a strict requirement of Semiont architecturally, but in the last month, I've started to pair a repository with a Git repository, that those are going to be one-to-one. I think that works very well. But at the end of the day, the .semiont directory is a peer to .git, but you have full control over all the other files in that repository. And within that .semiont directory, there's some operations-related scripts and config files, and then there is the event state. And all of that event state, that is durable state that we want to commit. There's a lot of other ephemeral state that gets stored in various directories in the container. Some of those might be work that you'd want to keep around longer, but they're not things that you'd want to commit. So after you start the knowledge base, you provide it. The first time you do that, you would provide it with the credentials of a user you'd want to create. And again, this is all just intended right now just for local development. I'll probably stand up a couple of ephemeral GitHub code space based knowledge bases that I'll stand up occasionally for demos. But for now, that we're going to treat them all as ephemeral things that let's say you within your organization might stand up. So if you run that script, it requires that you've got some kind of container technology, either Apple container, Docker, or Podman. If you run start, you'll get these resulting 5 containers running. And then if you happen to have Ollama desktop running already, it will detect that and use that for inference. And speaking of inference, again, the default is to use Ollama with those 2 Gemma models for inference. And there is an embedding model needed for the vector store that's going to be running for whether you go with the Anthropic config or this Ollama Gemma config. And then I happen to have put this together using Quadrant as a vector store. So it's not an embedding service where we use Ollama for that. This is just a simple vector store. And then here on the last slide, save the best for last here, the graph, the Neo4j. And you can see just just using the browser on port 7474, very early small knowledge base. The green nodes in this visualization represent the documents in the knowledge base, and that light brown, those are the annotations. So this is very small, not very sophisticated, and I'll talk about that schema and where that's going to be evolving soon. But pretty strong correspondence. That you think of those annotations for the moment, think of those as the links, and the green nodes are the documents in the knowledge base. Okay, so I showed you a little bit of Semiont interface. Now let's kind of walk through it a little bit more deliberately, and I'll explain what's going on. So you can see in the upper right, I've got a list of the knowledge bases, and in this case, I just for the purposes of this demo, I just spun up one of the ones I've got checked in. It's just got one set of 4 plays that are 2,500 years old and in the public domain. I've got that checked in, and then I just sort of added a few random things to it for the purpose of this talk and this demo today. So you land initially on that Discover page, and then just like I think you'd expect from a wiki, you can add resources. So this is how I added that hello Nodes AI document right before the talk. Oh, and I should mention there's a format dropdown right there, and it defaults to Markdown, but it does, and I'll show this later on, it does support images and PDFs. It does not support yet automated annotation of those things, but I think that's just a matter of filling a couple of gaps. Architecturally, we've already created the support for that. We know exactly where that code will land when we write that. Okay, so just a little bit about the theory. I mentioned clustering the events in the wiki by user intent. So this is where we landed, and I've chosen, I tried to choose especially old and simple words for these. A lot of the longer words are kind of spoken for and have all kinds of connotations. So these are the ones I went with. So I'll talk about most of these. So, but let's maybe get some of the simpler ones out of the way. On the right-hand side, browse, that's just using some materialized views that contain the simplest structure of the wiki. That happens via the browse events. Mark is the category of events for annotations. So creating a link and resolving that link, those are mark events. Beckon is sort of a surprising one. I was adding a bunch of visual feedback to the wiki. So after you generate, there are things that pulse and so forth. And I thought, rather than just considering that a little UI flourish, I think there's space for that to become a legitimate kind of first-class mechanism for basically saying to anybody, hey, look here, I want your attention. And maybe you could imagine that could be timed. So there's the immediate, I'd like your attention, look at this document, look at this annotation, or in a week from now, tell my collaborator to look at this thing. And maybe that thing will be the instructions of an activity that I want that collaborator to do. So those are kind of the simpler ones. And then gather, match, bind, and yield. I'll show some more examples of that, but gather is basically context assembly. Match, you could think of as search, but search with the intent of resolving a resolution, resolving a reference. And bind is the actual action of resolving a reference. And then yield is the generation or introduction of new resources / documents into the system. Okay, so here I'm going to use a few of those verbs in a flow. So, and I'll show 1 or 2 examples of this in later slides. But if we mark a resource as, let's say, that Neo4j link that was unresolved initially, take that hello Nodes AI, mark as a reference the word Neo4j, then gather context for that. That was the first little pop-up that you saw. And then on that, there were 3 options. I could choose to match it to an existing resource, aka entity. I could either just decide that no, it's not in there, and I don't want this system to produce it. I'm going to type it in. I didn't choose that either in this case. What I did was the third option. Just say, okay, hey AI, you whatever model I have configured, between what the model knows and between the context that I'm providing, that ought to be enough to produce a high quality resource. So that's the option I took in that case. And then lastly, the system took care of resolving that reference, and the question mark turned into a link icon. Okay, so getting back to a little bit more kind of enterprise-y examples. Here's a kind of a run. I have this on the GitHub repository. There's a screenshot of this letter unmarked, actually a little bit marked up. This is it in raw form. So this just gives me the opportunity to explain a couple of the features. You had seen earlier, I had already kind of used auto detection to detect, I think, all of the organizations, and it happened to pick up Semiont and Neo4j and Nodes AI. So in this case, I've already done that. I've detected people and organizations in one place, and then you notice if you look at the left-hand side there in the red box, I included the check mark to include descriptive references. So this would be like anaphoric or cataphoric references, but not necessarily pronouns. So we're not going to use the linguistics terms. We're going to call that, we call that in the UI descriptive references. So that picked up those two, the owner and the client, which are interesting. The client is possibly resolvable given this context. The owner, if you look at the context, is not, and in fact, that's a point that's an activity we need to undertake. We don't know who that is, and we need to confirm that person's identity. Some other annotations, I mentioned that linking was one of the annotation motivations that's done in blue. If you look at the tabs in the upper left there, there's some statistics in that first panel. Then there's the reference panel in blue. And then by name, yellow is highlighting, red is assessing, the bubble there is commenting, and then the last one is tagging. I should mention that those are all defined by the W3C Web Annotation standard. I do have a reasonably faithful implementation of that standard as far as the annotations themselves go. That is considered the native representation. And I initially found that because I wanted multimedia support and wanted to, who had thought about doing selections across different media types. And at that time I was doing references and highlights. But then not only did that web annotation standard give me that way to think about standards or standard selectors, it also had a bunch of motivations defined. And I'm not using all of them. I've got these 5 baked into Semiont, but adding others if they were of interest would be relatively straightforward. So in this case, the instruction I'm giving to Semiont is say, hey, flag using an assessing motivation, which is represented by red underlines, flag anything that poses a scheduling risk. So you can see that's been done, overlaid on top of the document. And then on the right in the assessing panel, you can see further explanation of why each of those passages was flagged as a scheduling risk. Tagging, I'll show an example of this, but I have baked into Semiont, and I'll probably extract these and make these fully external, but there's a handful of, I call them tag schemas. I think this is a gateway to ontologies. I'm not going to use that word yet. But there are a handful of simple mechanisms I have that I think are helping to set that stage. This is something that's very useful in legal writing when you're learning to write. Apparently, I'm not a lawyer, but I understand that they actually teach this way of thinking about legal writing. And it's pretty straightforward. You can identify issues, rules, applications, and conclusions. And here's an example where you can see on the right in the tagging panel, we've identified what's visible there as a rule and an application. And then we've got a conclusion. I guess they're a little bit out of sync here. I didn't have the conclusion scrolled into view, but that reversed in part, affirmed in part, and remanded. That's the conclusion at the end of that Supreme Court opinion. So going back and just explaining that word gathering context. We talked about how the owner was this ambiguous descriptive reference, and we can gather the context and generate a document for that. In this case, I'm showing the client. You know, is that resolvable given the context of this one email? So the way you pop up that gathered context modal is you would click on that question mark next to the client as it appears in the entry in that references panel in the kind of the middle of the page there. So click on that question mark, and then this gathered context, after a few seconds, it will talk to the graph, it'll talk to the vector store, it'll talk to the materialized views, and form this context. Now, this is often, as I've seen AI systems built, this is often just sort of something that's done behind the scenes. I think that's one of the areas where, when we say that we want in this project the humans and the AI to be architectural equivalents, this is an example of that, where you could edit that. In this case, it's fairly limited. We can just add a hint, but over time, this can be something that the human could just fully control. Say, no, those pure annotations are not important. I want to strike that. Or, oh, you forgot something. We want to go deeper. Let's leverage the ontologies that we have in place to go deep on some thread that we know is really important ultimately to either finding a match in the knowledge base already, or generating a new resource that represents the entity that we're referring to. And then this is the alternate resolution strategy I'm showing. In that case, it's the exact same workflow up to the point where you choose a resolution strategy. So you would click on the question mark, see the gathered context, and then this time click match, and it would use that gathered context to propose the entities that you could resolve the link with. I'll just mention briefly, it supports 29 languages. That's nothing that Semiont is doing other than allowing you the ability to select the language, and it preserves it, passes it through to any generation or yield calls. Speaking of generation, this is an example of generating the owner. So we were able to take that vague reference to the owner, gather some context, and I should mention, let me go back here, that those peer annotations, that's one of the ways in which we're using the graph. The use of the graph right now is, I think there's a lot of room for it to grow. It already provides a lot of value. So here again, we see it's pulling in the peer annotations, Michael, Sarah, and Acme Corporation. That's something on the roadmap that I'm especially excited to build out. But there's a lot of kind of just this initial workflow that needs to be established. And then I mentioned it's multimodal. So one of the personal reasons I landed on this idea of a wiki was just doing family history. And I've got a lot of old photographs and things like that. So the ability to annotate images in this case, or PDFs in a lot of enterprise setting, I've got the ability to represent and annotate manually those, but we'll be working on auto annotating those things. I'm just we're short on time, so this is up on the GitHub repository if you want to take a look at that. There's a system of record. If you look at the second smallest yellow rectangle there's a system of record that corresponds with the Git repository. Everything else is derived from the durable information. The other purple boxes, those are all derived from the information that's stored in the Git repository. And then the green are the actors that are managed by the backend that the front end is talking to. I'll just gloss over this stuff. There's a lot left yet to do, but it's come a long ways since July when it was started. And it is open source. The discussions are enabled. Would love your questions and feedback. So I think I will leave it at that. And I'll take a look at the questions in the chat after this talk and try to respond. Otherwise, please go to that discussions feature on the GitHub repository. I'd love to follow up.